Hi, everybody. I'm Vladimir Jutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me. These are all feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates around the country. If it's happening out there, we're going to bring it to you live right here. Let's begin. There's a new name in the running for Attorney General. After President-elect Donald Trump's first pick, Matt Gaetz, withdrew amid sexual misconduct allegations. What you need to know about Pam Bondi's President Trump's choice to lead the nation's top law enforcement agency. Plus, storms from coast to coast slams the Northeast as the Pacific Northwest reels from a bomb cyclone. How all of this might impact your holiday travel plans. And we are standing by for liftoff. Blue Origin is set to launch its 9th space tourism flight. We're going to bring that to you live when it blasts off. This is CBS News 24/7. Let's begin this hour with the abrupt change to President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General. He tapped former Florida AG Pam Bondi after Matt Gaetz withdrew his name from consideration. I want to bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who's joining me now to talk about this. Ed, this is kind of an interesting choice. Walk us through, remind us who Pam Bondi is, and if there will be any pushback by members of the United States Senate.
Vlad, good to be with you. This is a more conventional Trump-style pick in that she has professional experience in the line of work she's being asked to focus on, but also a devoted, if you will, Trump loyalist, someone who's been with him since his first presidential campaign, even before it began, and someone who can trace much of her early political success to Sarah Palin, someone who endorsed her when she first ran for Florida Attorney General. She served 2 terms in that role, perhaps best remembered to most of the country for things like being part of the conservative and Republican attorneys general push to sue against the size and scope of the Affordable Care Act and various parts of it. There were at least 2 big attempts by her and other Republican attorneys general to do that in the later years of the Obama administration. It was one of the first times that she earned real national acclaim from conservatives for her work. Someone who also will face questions from not only Republican senators maybe, but certainly from Democratic critics about a lot of work she's done since she was Attorney General. She was, among other things, President Trump's one of his defense attorneys during his first impeachment trial, and has made a lot of money and spent a lot of time in more recent years as a lobbyist, working for clients like the country of Qatar. She, for the last year, has helped run a policy shop that is aligned closely with the President-elect's Make America Great Again movement. So again, has sort of been in the sphere of MAGA world, if you will, but is someone that already is earning pretty widespread acclaim from Republican senators, who, of course, are key to getting her confirmed.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from Senator Lindsey Graham, Ed, who I know you know is a very powerful voice on that Senate Judiciary Committee, who says that she should be nominated, she should be put to that position without any problems. But let's talk now about Pete Hegseth, who met with some senators yesterday amid those sexual assault allegations. How did those meetings go, and where do things stand for him?
They were with mostly supportive Republicans, the ones that are going to vote yes because Donald Trump wants him in the job. But there are questions that remain about that police report that was issued regarding a 2017 incident in Monterey, California. He told reporters that that incident was investigated, no charges were filed, and as far as he's concerned, the matter is closed. That's also what the Trump transition team says. Whether or not they fully understood the scope of the allegations against him and whether there's anything else similar out there remains to be seen. But this is a potential roadblock for his nomination, should it ever come, or he may determine in the coming days that he, too, lacks sufficient support. The mix of who might be concerned is a little different than those that might have been concerned about Gaetz, and it will focus specifically on female Republican senators who see those sexual assault allegations, his past public comments about women serving in uniform, especially in combat, and may have concerns about that. So we'll wait and see. But at this point now, he's the selection probably facing the most scrutiny.
Yeah, he keeps saying to reporters that he was never charged, but in fact, that he was cleared, but in fact, he was just never charged. Ed O'Keefe for us, reporting from West Palm Beach. Thank you very much, Ed. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to have more about Pam Bondi when I talk with CBS News Miami reporter Jim DeFede later this hour. But for more on the Trump transition, let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane. So, Scott, Gaetz may have withdrawn from the Attorney General consideration, but your reporting suggests that there is still a spot for him in Congress if he wants one. And this will be really interesting for people who don't understand how resignations from Congress work.
Yeah, Vlad, good morning. Matt Gaetz on November 5th won a seat in the 119th Congress, which begins and is sworn in on January 3rd. He can't resign from a Congress that hasn't started yet. So according to multiple congressional sources, the state of Florida has reported up to the U.S. House clerk all of the names of winners for the 119th Congress, and Matt Gaetz is on that list. So if he chooses to take his seat, the one he won earlier this month, he will be seated in the U.S. Congress. In fact, one of his colleagues joked the only thing Matt Gaetz would miss out on is he would get the worst available office space because they had the lottery for office space yesterday, and he wasn't part of that. But he would have a seat, and he would have a vote. That's if he chooses to do it. But, of course, the thing that dogs Matt Gaetz through the confirmation process he was part of over the past few days, and if he were to rejoin the House, is that House Ethics Committee investigation of allegations of sex misconduct and drug use, allegations he denies. If he's a member of Congress again, suddenly, Vlad, he is again under the jurisdiction of the U.S. House Ethics Committee, and that report would likely no longer be bottled up.
Yeah, Scott, I saw there was some reporting that suggested that there were more allegations that were going to come to light, which is why Matt Gaetz chose to withdraw his name from consideration. What are you learning about that?
Yeah, we know that this House Ethics Committee, politically speaking, had the prospect of being a political ticking time bomb, that there were things in the report that may not have been public already, that there were allegations that were not necessarily public already. But what's more, Vlad? With or without that report, Matt Gaetz would sit before a Senate committee at a confirmation hearing and no doubt be asked specific questions about that report, about sex misconduct. And those public airing of just the questions was a political problem for President-elect Trump, and certainly carried the risk of being, to put it charitably, embarrassing or tough for Matt Gaetz.
All right, let me switch gears here, Scott, and talk about the testimony this week on President Biden's $100 billion disaster relief request after Hurricanes Helene and Milton. What are you hearing about that?
Oh, by the way, there are disaster-impacted communities from North Carolina to Virginia to the wildfires in the West who desperately need money. A Small Business Administration disaster loan fund ran out of cash in October because of Helene and Maria and all the needs, and they have not replenished it. Our latest reporting is that there are truly tens of thousands of businesses and homeowners who have applied for the loans to help rebuild, and they cannot get the money because they have not refilled the coffers here in Washington. What's more, Vlad, our latest CBS News reporting is that there is no move imminent next week or in early December. This could go all the way to the next deadline for government spending. That's December 20th. One senator from North Carolina told me that's fine and all, but the money was needed yesterday. This is an emerging problem, if not crisis, between now and the week of Christmas.
Wow. All right. Scotty Mack for us in D.C. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it as always. Have a nice weekend. All right, let's talk about the soaking rain from that deadly bomb cyclone, which has some parts of the Pacific Northwest underwater. Hundreds of thousands of people woke up again this morning without any power. And now another dangerous storm may be on the way. CBS News national weather correspondent Rob Marciano has the latest from Eureka, California.
Well, it's been another dark and stormy start to the day out here in Northern California. We continue to get buffered by wind and rain with this atmospheric river and now this newly intensifying cyclone just off the coastline. We've had winds gusting over 60 miles an hour at some of the more exposed locations, record rainfalls in places like Mount Shasta and Santa Rosa. Generally speaking, from between here and wine country, we've seen about a foot or more of rainfall. So, there's a lot of roads like this that are just blocked out and because of standing water. We've had a number of landslides, small landslides, mind you, across the highways and more remote roadways. They've had a pretty good handle on, but I think we're going to see more of that. And with this saturated soil, these winds gusting, I think more trees and potentially power outages are incoming. So beyond the standing water, the river system here continues to take on this water and try to rush it out towards the ocean. And the creeks and the rivers are rising rapidly. The Eel River, not far from here, is going to go to major flood stage later on this afternoon. Residents and farmers around that area are rushing to complete preparations for that event. Haven't seen something like that since at least 2019. So this soil just can't take any more water, and this AR is not turning off until at least later on tonight. Rob Marciano, CBS News, reporting for the Weather Channel in Eureka, California.
All right, Rob, thanks very much. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, Vlad, it really is crazy when you start thinking about this storm and this 1-2 punch that the Pacific coast is getting. It's usually one storm comes in and it moves out. Now a second storm is moving in. Meanwhile, you've got another storm in the Northeast. We'll talk about both of these storms. Let's start in the Pacific Northwest, where these impacts continue. Additional rainfall on top of what Rob was just talking about, that foot of rain. Some places could see an additional 8 to 12 inches of rainfall. So obviously flooding is an ongoing concern, as well as more land and rock slides. So that's a significant issue as we go all the way through the weekend. Now, snow, you talk about rainfall up to a foot. Well, some places could see an additional 3 feet of snow as you get up into the Sierra Nevada and the Cascades. So we're going to continue to see these power outages with those wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour and continued travel disruption. Speaking of travel disruption, in the Northeast, we've got, yes, beneficial precipitation, but now it's coming in the form of this winter weather. Some places in West Virginia could see upwards of a foot of snow, gusty winds as we go throughout the day today. That could impact travel issues from on the ground, on the roads, as well as air travel, especially later this afternoon as that snow and rain continues to fall. Meanwhile, Vlad, any pre-Thanksgiving Day travel across the central part of the United States looks absolutely perfect. Back to you for now.
I like the sound of that. Grant Gilmore for us. Thank you, Grant. Appreciate it. All right, we're following 2 security incidents out of London this morning. We'll have details next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The Capitol Hill Christmas tree is here. The 80-foot spruce traveled nearly 2,800 miles from Alaska and arrived at the West Front lawn moments ago. The conifer at the Capitol takes several hours to be set up and lifted into place. It's different from the White House Christmas tree, which is scheduled to arrive Monday from North Carolina. All right, the U.S. Embassy in London has reopened after a suspicious item was found nearby, prompting local police to carry out a controlled explosion. London's Metropolitan Police say initial indications are that the item was a hoax device, and an investigation is underway. RMT's Taib has more from London.
Well, all roads leading to the U.S. Embassy here in South London were closed for several hours after the Metropolitan Police carried out a controlled explosion following the discovery of what's being described as a suspect package. Now, bystanders say they heard a loud bang not far from here, and in an earlier statement, the British police force said that it was investigating a suspicious item close to the south bank of the River Thames. Now, the U.S. moved its embassy from central London to the 12-story purpose-built glass cube here in the Nine Elms area back in 2018, partly for safety reasons. Now, CBS News has spoken to former UK counterterrorism experts who described the U.S. embassy as, quote, one of, if not the most secure places in London, and that controlled explosions are sometimes carried out when there's a suspicious package or item that officials want to investigate without, quote, putting a human in the mix, and that similar incidents in recent years have been benign. Now, in a social media post, the U.S. Embassy said the London Metropolitan Police's actions have so far been out of an abundance of caution. Back to you.
All right, MTS, thank you. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called Russia's use of a new type of missile, quote, a clear and severe escalation. NATO and Ukraine are now set to hold emergency talks next week. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie Daggett has been following this for us, and he joins me now to talk about this from the Pentagon. So Charlie, how do we expect Ukraine to respond to the use of these new missiles?
Well, they're bracing for more. President Zelensky said Russia is using Ukraine as a testing ground, and in some ways that's accurate. We asked officials here why they keep describing that new missile, this mystery missile, as experimental, and it's not only because it's the first time it's been used in combat and battle. As far as they know, they haven't seen a whole lot of testing on it, and it's a reconfigured Russian ICBM. Technically the RS-26 ballistic missile. In fact, it's so near an ICBM that Russia notified the United States of the launch through nuclear risk reduction channels. That's traditional, briefly before the launch. Putin said that he would do the same he would continue to give those warnings before the launches, he said in a televised event yesterday, in order to avoid civilian casualties. But it is. I mean, it's a clear escalation. It's capable of traveling more than 3,000 miles, carrying multiple warheads, including a nuclear warhead. But it's also worth noting here that, Russia has plenty of other options in the arsenal to reach all of Ukraine, stretching all the way west to Lviv. So it's new. It's hard to intercept. At the moment, it's designed to spread fear rather than significant damage. I mean, that first target, Dnipro, is within easy reach of several Russian weapons, and it's come under fire before.
The other thing that Putin said, Charlie, is he warned that he might potentially attack other countries if they supply Ukraine with those missiles that are used to strike Russia. Is that raising a red flag for the United States?
Well, Vlad, in real terms, no. It's not the first time he has said that, and the intelligence community has been all over this, right from the beginning. Putin's been threatening to attack the West since the war in Ukraine began. The United States and its allies, including people in this building, have been keeping a close eye on that in terms of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR as they call it, along with the UK, which has been fundamental, Ukraine, and others. And there's been a wealth of information in studying battlefield tactics from the Russians. But that said, the weapon has caused concern by virtue of the fact it's the first time it's been used. It's an unknown. It wasn't carrying a massive warhead, but it could. It launches with little notice, and that's the threat that it poses. So officials say the intelligence suggests Russia doesn't have many of them, but Putin said U.S. defenses aren't capable of intercepting them. Now, Poland, this is important, has raised the alarm, obviously being closest to the fight, bordering Ukraine. Prime Minister saying it's taking on dramatic proportions and the threat of global conflict is serious and real, his words.
All right. Charlie D'Agata from the Pentagon this morning. Charlie, thanks.
Thanks, Vlad.
Let's turn now to the Middle East, where Israeli forces are reportedly engaged in heavy fighting with Hezbollah in southwestern Lebanon. Meanwhile, Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry is warning all hospitals in the enclave will have to stop or reduce services as early as this weekend due to a lack of fuel. Now, this comes after the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his former defense minister, and a Hamas commander, accusing them of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Our Deborah Pata has more.
The International Criminal Court's decision to issue arrest warrants for war crimes against Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has triggered a furious response across the political spectrum here, with the Prime Minister calling them anti-Semitic. The Hague's allegations of grave crimes against humanity are unprecedented in Israel, marking a significant legal and political turning point for the country. While a trial cannot be held in absentia, the 124 ICC member states are required to arrest Netanyahu if he enters their territory. The Israeli leader will still be welcome in the US, which is not a member of the ICC, but less so in European capitals, where some countries have already indicated their willingness to comply with the arrest warrants. Israeli international law professor Ayel Gross says as uncomfortable as many Israelis feel seeing their leaders accused of war crimes, not enough questions have been asked about what could have been done differently. In particular, the lack of access to food and humanitarian aid is cited as an example of a credible war crime against Palestinians. In Gaza, many Palestinians have welcomed the arrest warrants, saying a successful prosecution would go some way toward bringing justice for the more than 44,000 people killed and the many more still facing starvation in over a year of war. Back to you.
Deborah Pata for us. Thank you, Deborah. A new proposal to fight climate change has sparked debate on the final day of UN COP29 summit, which is happening in Azerbaijan. It calls for wealthy nations to pledge $250 billion by 2035. The money will go to poorer countries to help them curb and adapt to climate change. It sounds big, but leaders of many smaller countries believe it does not go far enough. Okay, we're counting down the minutes to blast off as Blue Origin prepares to launch tourists into space in just a matter of minutes. That is a live picture coming into CBS News Broadcast Center. We're going to bring it to you live as soon as it takes off. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. Another major E. coli outbreak nationwide, this time impacting ground beef. More than 100,000 pounds of beef from Wolverine Packing Company have been recalled after more than a dozen cases of E. coli-related illnesses. The Food Safety and Inspection Service continues to investigate the outbreak. Burglaries targeting high-profile athletes could be linked to organized and some skilled crime groups. An NFL memo claims the group surveyed players' whereabouts and then target their homes on game days. The warning follows break-ins at the homes of football stars Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce last month. The homes of two NBA stars were also burglarized. Sources tell CBS News the FBI is investigating whether a South American crime ring is behind these burglaries. And Sean Diddy Combs is expected to be back in a New York City courtroom today. He and his attorneys are making another attempt to get the rap mogul out of jail on bail after he was denied earlier this month. Combs has been behind bars for months as he awaits trial for racketeering and sex trafficking charges. He has pleaded not guilty. Okay, we want to bring you back now to our top story as President-elect Donald Trump has selected Pam Bondi as his pick for Attorney General. Matt Gaetz withdrew his name from consideration amid scrutiny over sexual misconduct allegations. Bondi is the former Attorney General of Florida. I want to bring in CBS News Miami reporter Jim DeFede to talk more about this. Jim, no one has covered politics as long as you have in Florida. At least it feels that way. So tell us about Bondi's career as Florida's Attorney General and when she caught the attention of the president-elect.
So Bondi became Attorney General in 2010 after serving 18 years as a local prosecutor. And her tenure as Attorney General from 2010 to 2018 was pretty typical for a conservative. She sued to try to strike down the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. In 2014, she filed a lawsuit trying to stop the recognition of gay marriages in Florida, saying that just because another state recognizes gay marriage, it would impose significant public harm on Floridians if Florida was forced to recognize gay marriage. But I think the issue during her term, as Attorney General that will get scrutiny is her handling of Trump University, a blast from the past. As you recall, Trump University was shut down in 2011 amid a lot of claims of fraud. The New York State Attorney General was filing a lawsuit against Trump University and Trump himself. The Florida Attorney General, Bondi at the time, said she was considering joining that New York suit because there were so many potential victims of fraud in the state of Florida. 3 days after saying that, a charitable foundation from the Trump organization donated $25,000 to a Bondi re-election committee, a political action committee that was designed to help her win re-election in 2014. And then Bondi shortly thereafter announced that she would not be joining the New York State suit. So, she denies that there was any link between the two, but she's always been a favorite of Donald Trump. She served as, one of his attorneys during the first impeachment. She has long been someone that he likes because, in part, she's on Fox News. And Donald Trump, as we all know, has a real thing for people who can present well on TV. So I think in a lot of ways, this is an ideal match.
Yeah, and that's the question, Jim. And it sort of begs another question, which is why didn't the president-elect go with Pam Bondi in the first place? I mean, at the very least, when you look at her career as a prosecutor, she's got more than a dozen years prosecuting crimes, whereas I didn't even know until, this is probably my own ignorance, but I didn't even know that Matt Gaetz was a lawyer until he was nominated.
Yeah, no, I think, look, the Matt Gaetz pick was always almost a loyalty test to see how far Donald Trump could push the line. Could he actually sort of get the Senate to go along with the Matt Gaetz choice? I also think it worked in a lot of ways for Matt Gaetz to be nominated this way so that he could resign from Congress just before the Ethics Commission was scheduled to release their report. Of course, I don't think that worked out well for them because the level of scrutiny that Gaetz received ended up forcing him to step down. But I don't think that's necessarily the last we'll see of Matt Gaetz. Yeah, for sure. Our Scott McFarlane reports that he could actually find himself seated in the next Congress. Jim DeFede for us this morning. Jim, always great to have you, my friend. Thank you very much. Thanks, bud. All right, we want to take you now to West Texas, where Blue Origin is getting ready for its 9th space tourism flight. People on board the new Shepard flight include so-called
space scout Emily Calandrelli, married couple Mark and Sharon Hagel, and Austin Littoral, who won a spot on the rocket capsule in a giveaway. This is the second space flight for the Hagels. The entire flight will last about 10 to 12 minutes. We're going to take the whole thing. Let's watch.
Those in the green zone today for launch. We're at T-minus 30 seconds. Let's hand it off to mission control and launch this rocket.
Tap off, temp low. Looking to proceed.
This is thermal.
Believe so. T-minus 16, guidance internal.
Yeah, go to proceed.
T-minus 10, go to proceed. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Command engine start. 2, 1. Ignition.
Space. Follow along with us on your screen. We have velocity picking up. We're gaining altitude as New Shepard pierces through the atmosphere. You see that BE-3 engine at 100% power level. New Shepard is approaching max Q here soon, where the aerodynamic stress on that vehicle is at its max.
feet.
New Shepard has passed max Q. BE-3 is pushing back up to 100% as the atmosphere gets thinner and higher.
40,000 feet.
Yeah, right now the astronauts are experiencing increasing Gs. This is going to increase from 1 to 3 Gs here. That's 3 times your weight pushing you down into that seat as you launch to space. Quite a ride. We're nearing 2 minutes of boost, about 2 minutes into our mission. So our next big milestone here is main engine cutoff, where that BE-3 engine will temporarily terminate.
2 minutes negative MDF.
Yeah. 10 seconds to MECO. 150,000 feet. MECO.
There it is, that MECO, or main engine cutoff. Our vehicle is now coasting at 2,000 miles per hour. Coming up here soon, we'll have the separation of the crew capsule from the booster. And what do we have there, Alice? On the bottom of our screen, we have our 0G indicator.
250,000 feet.
You can see it in the center of your screen. Separation is confirmed. The crew capsule is floating in 0G as the New Shepard booster starts its descent back to the landing pad. An absolutely huge congratulations to all 6 of our crew. They are officially astronauts.
All right. You've been watching live coverage of the very latest Blue Origin space launch. It's the 9th space tourism flight. So let's go ahead and bring in CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood to talk more about this historic moment. Bill, so are these space tourist flights seeming to you to be getting sort of more routine? It happens so quickly. It's sort of, I know if you're probably a passenger on Blue Origin, it's incredibly exhilarating. But for those of us watching on the ground, being the 9th, it does seem like it's sort of over before you even blink.
Yeah, you know, from launch to landing is about 10 minutes. And you're right, this is the 9th flight with people on board. So at some point, I won't say routine because as a space reporter, we never, ever call rocket flights routine. I mean, when you're riding on top of a rocket and accelerating to these speeds into a vacuum environment, there's nothing routine about that yet anyway, maybe in 20 or 50 years. But, you know, we still have to watch these closely because something can go wrong with these flights. And with these kinds of missions, when something goes wrong, it's usually catastrophic. But so far, their flights with people on board have been flawless. Blue Origin's got a very reliable rocket engine, very reliable rocket. And, of course, their spacecraft, the capsule itself, has done perfectly during all of their flights. So routine, no. Worth tracking, yes.
Given your years of experience covering the space program here in the United States, Bill, you hear the announcer say, "Congratulations to the crew, you're officially astronauts." By the definition, are they?
You know, it's a debatable point. Certainly, these private companies like Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, they want their passengers to think they're going to be astronauts. You know, NASA and the Department of Defense, they think 50 miles up is the point where space begins. It's where the atmosphere no longer has any effect on flaps and rudders and things like that. And by that definition, they're astronauts. But I think, you know, when you consider the training required for professional astronauts and the sort of missions they do in orbit compared to these suborbital up and down flights like we're seeing today, it's hard for me to consider these passengers astronauts in any kind of traditional sense.
Yeah, because if I was to be a passenger on one of these Blue Origin flights, Bill, I would put in my bio, Vladimir Putin, astronaut. And that's why I asked the question.
Absolutely.
Let's bring in that
space. And really, nobody can argue with you, you know? I mean, you flew above 50 miles. By that definition, you're an astronaut.
I kind of felt like an astronaut when I was in the old Concorde way back when. So yeah, let's bring in space expert Scott Heidler to join Bill Harwood and our coverage of the 9th launch of the Blue Origin tourism flight. Scott, your thoughts as we watch the capsule returning to Earth.
Yeah, I definitely want to hop on something that Bill had mentioned, and that is that spaceflight is never easy. And you hear any engineer, lower level, all the way up to the head of NASA, they say over and over again, spaceflight is not easy. Space is not easy. And that even goes for these types of flights, space tourism flights, if you will. As Bill mentioned, you know, that any small thing could go wrong that could end up in a catastrophe. So there's a big focus on that. But also, you know, going beyond that, about the specific mission, this type of travel, and that it is space tourism, but what it does is more than just give 6 people the ride of their life. It exposes a lot of folks, and we're seeing it come right down the booster landing right now. When you look at that image right there, a booster landing on ground safely that can be used again, that's part of what this is all about too. That is development. So even though you have 6 folks,
yeah, that's very cool to me. Sorry, Scott, there was another person in my ear. Were you still speaking?
Yeah, sorry. And so bottom line is, yes, space tourism, but also it helps the space companies understand and improve their launch systems, because the more you do it, the more you learn.
Yeah, and that's my question to the both of you. And you're right, watching the booster coming down, to me, is it's actually cooler than watching it go up. I don't know, something about the way those reverse thrusters fire up as it safely makes its way down gently to the ground is kind of cool. And so, Bill, are we, you know, I know there's tourists on board, but are there also any kind of experiments that the scientists are picking up from just this launch?
Not on this flight. I mean, Blue Origin may have some instrumentation on the booster that's collecting more data. You know, they're also designing a moon lander and other vehicles like that they're taking all this landing data and plugging back into that. But this flight doesn't have any crew-tended research on board, but Blue Origin routinely launches NASA experiments, corporate university experiments. They've launched the New Shepard without any people on board, just instruments. And so in that sense, yeah, it's a useful suborbital platform. But I stress again, you know, they're getting 3 to 4 minutes maybe of weightlessness. That's it. They don't go to orbit. So it kind of limits the research you can do. But the scientists say it is absolutely useful, and they take advantage of that.
So, Scott, we can see the capsule coming back down to Earth. Describe what potentially those tourists are feeling like right now.
Right now, they're on the tail end of the ride of their life, if you will. And as Bill just said, it's short, but it's something that two of them on board have experienced it before. From a couple from Central Florida here, it's got to be amazing now because you're kind of after that peak of euphoria, if you will. There's the idea of when you're at apogee, when you're seeing the Earth for the first time from that perspective, it does something inside. It does something to you as a person. So I'm sure they're chit-chatting about that. I'm sure they're reveling about the experience that they just had. Again, for two of them, it's the second time. So it's again kind of going through that experience. But then also I would be, of course, I've thought this through many, many times. At this point too, it's like, yes, you're going through this amazing experience and it's about to come to an end. But I'm also like, when is that going to finish? When am I going to hit the ground, which we're about to see right now?
Yeah, I wonder, gents, I sort of joked earlier that I'd flown on the Concorde many, many years ago when it was active. And I can't remember now, but I seem to recall that it flew at 40,000 feet. And I remember the pilot telling us to look out the window when we were at our highest altitude. And you could, just above the clouds, see the blueness of space. So I'm guessing that when you're in that capsule, you see it's the reverse. You're looking down at the Earth as opposed to looking up. You are, for all intents and purposes, in space, right, Bill?
Yes, for all intents and purposes. Although I think the Concorde flew up pretty close to 60,000 feet, but the New Shepard capsule is well over 200,000 feet. They are really up there. And the view out those windows, and I'll point out the New Shepard has the largest windows of any spacecraft currently flying. You get an incredible view up there. There's no question about that. I'm not trying to be a cheerleader, but the pictures are pretty spectacular. So, the flight lasts 10 minutes, but the views you get at the top of that trajectory, I can't even imagine the memories you take home from something like that. Professional astronauts see that all the time, but for civilians, that's a unique view, no question.
Yeah, you definitely jarred my memory there, Bill. You're right. It was about 60,000 feet because normal planes fly at 40,000. But I still recall just that sense of wonder and amazement at that altitude. So you're right. I can only imagine what it's like for those passengers on this 9th voyage of Blue Origin as a space tourism flight. Bill, Scott, thank you both very, very much. We'll speak to you on the next one.
You bet.
Thank you.
All right. Let's talk about Kansas City now, which is home to the first ever stadium built exclusively for women's soccer. CPKC Stadium hosts the National Women's Soccer League Championship game this weekend between the Washington Spirit and the Orlando Pride. And that's where we find CBS News Saturday morning co-host and sports correspondent Dana Jacobson, who's joining me now to talk more about this. So, Dana, this is a huge match between the Pride and the Spirit. You got a chance to talk with the teams. Also, you got a chance, I saw in your piece earlier for CBS Mornings, to tour the stadium, which is incredibly cool.
Yeah, I mean, Vlad, it's really exciting. Remember, you mentioned it. This is the first stadium that was built for a pro sports team that's for women. That hasn't been done before. So forget what the players are even playing for that title. They're happy to have an environment like this and what's been created here in Kansas City. And as for that title, of course it matters. They're all happy to be here, but it was very clear that what matters is capturing that championship. If the Spirit win, it would be their second title. For the Pride, though, their first. And these two teams are so evenly matched. Now, they did play twice this season. The Pride won both of those, but these two teams finished the regular season tied in wins. So you can expect, everybody is expecting a close match when we have that on Saturday night.
The other thing that I learned from your piece, Dana, is that there isn't a bad seat in the house, which is so rare. And you've been to so many sports stadiums across the country. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, Chris Long, one of the co-owners, I think I'm going to get this right because I said it's less than 100 feet. No seat is further than 100 feet. It's like 94 feet, so it's even better than that. They really took time to curate this environment because it is about the fans. It's about inclusivity, and it's about everything from the seats to you're seeing behind me. They're starting to take the tarp off of the pitch. This grass is curated in a way that we haven't seen before. Top of the line, state of the art. They've got heaters below it because obviously the temperatures here can get quite quite chilly. They have a vacuum system that if it rains, it can drain it. I believe that their head groundskeeper told me in like less than 2 minutes, they can get it drained from the field. And they have these LED grow lights, which had been on it earlier, and that keeps the grass in pristine condition. This is what matters the most. Think about any environment where you're playing. Imagine if it's basketball. You've got, wood that isn't done well. You can't have grass that is bumped or not seeded properly. And this is something in women's soccer, especially, we've seen just poor field conditions, even at the World Cup level. So this facility and this pitch is state-of-the-art, top of the line, and one that all of the women in the NWSL can appreciate, and even all the fans throughout.
Indeed. Dana, this is really, really cool seeing you there, seeing our colleagues from CBS Mornings there as well, and very, very excited for the game. Dana Jacobson reporting for us. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right. We do have some breaking news to share with you folks, which is that the hush money case for President-elect Donald Trump in New York has been canceled by Judge Merchan. His motion was due on December 2nd, and prosecutors' response was due on December 9th. But now we're getting into the newsroom right now that this case has been canceled. We're going to get some more details on that after the break, so stick around for that. But you are streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, breaking news just into the newsroom. President-elect Trump's sentencing in that hush money case in New York has been canceled indefinitely. This is now coming to us from the judge, Judge Juan Merchan, who is now saying that this case has been canceled indefinitely. You'll recall that this was the sentencing on the conviction charges related to the hush money that he allegedly paid to a porn star. That porn star, Stormy Daniels. And this is all based on the judge's decision to toss the case entirely, most likely, I'm speculating now, due to Donald Trump's election win. He is now the president-elect of the United States. And there was some reporting earlier this week that Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney, would not oppose the president-elect's bid to freeze sentencing while the latest attempt to get that sentencing on the books was hashed out. Sorry, did you say we had? All right. Talking in my ear. So here's the deals, folks. The judge now is saying that this decision has been canceled indefinitely, and we will not get a decision or a sentencing on the president-elect for this hush money case. Now, again, this was all stemming back to the allegations that the former president had paid money to Stormy Daniels. He was convicted, Donald Trump was, on 34 counts for falsifying business records in that historic case. He was found guilty by 12 jury members of his peer, 12 Manhattanites, and this was an unprecedented criminal prosecution of an ex-president. This happened after only 12 hours of deliberation. Jury members of the jury found the president guilty on all those counts before. And if you recall, we were showing that right here on CBS News 24/7. The word guilty was repeated some 33 times on live television. The president-elect was sitting there, as you see in this image that we're showing you right now, slouched in his seat, shoulders forward, tilting his head, looking at each of the jurors, those 7 men and 5 women, as they confirmed his fate. And that is where we were. President afterwards said to reporters that he was fighting for a country, fighting for the Constitution, called it a nation in decline. There was reaction from both sides of the aisle. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called it the rule of law, which applies to everyone, including a former president of the United States. But then you had House GOP members such as Elise Stefanik of New York, who blasted the decision back then, saying that it showed how corrupt and rigged the American justice system had become. So that was where we were. And now, of course, the news coming into the CBS newsroom that Judge Juan Merchan says that the hush money trial sentencing has been put on hold indefinitely. And so that is where we're standing by to get some reporting from one of our correspondents who may be on the scene for us. What are we hearing on that, Eric? All right. Again, if you're just joining us now, Manhattan, the judge in the Donald Trump hush money sentencing trial has decided to put this sentencing that was supposed to happen on November 26th. He has decided to put that on hold indefinitely. That sentencing, which was scheduled for November 26th, had already been postponed several times. And now we are hearing that it is postponed indefinitely. All right, Jessica Levinson is joining me now to talk about this. Jessica, what's your reaction?
Vlad, can you hear me?
I can.
So my reaction is that this makes sense. We are in a situation where this is the first in the nation case where we have a former president who's a convicted felon and who's then re-elected to be in the Oval Office again. And we don't have a roadmap for this. There's no legal guidebook. So what we have is a situation where I think it makes all the sense in the world for the judge to say, let's push pause. Maybe there will be a sentencing after the term, but I think all of the legal and constitutional questions related to imposing a sentence before President Trump once again becomes the occupant of the Oval Office was just too high. Those thresholds were too high at this point.
Yeah, and describe a little bit more of what you mean by those thresholds, Jessica, because, again, for our audience who's just joining us now as we are nearing the bottom of the hour, the New York judge Juan Merchan has delayed indefinitely the sentencing in President-elect Donald Trump's hush money case, which you recall was the conviction that the president experienced back in May for 34 criminal counts of falsifying business records stemming from those payments he made to that porn star, Stormy Daniels. And so those convictions stand, Jessica. He is still a convicted criminal, but no sentence will be imposed, I guess.
It looks like no sentence will be imposed. So you asked me a great question about the legal issues here. Mm-hmm. So what we're looking at is a situation where we're about to have the head of one of the federal branches, the head of the executive branch, potentially face a criminal sentence. And even though this isn't a separation of powers question, it's a question about levels of government. And I promise we're not going to get too wonky here, except to say when it comes to the state continuing with a criminal case, and in this case, imposing a sentence, I think the argument that the Trump team would make, legally speaking, is it invades the executive's power and constitutional duties. Under the Constitution, the president has the duty to take care to faithfully execute the laws and to have imposed a sentence. Now, I think there's an argument that you could impose a sentence and it could be legal, but I think what the judge is saying here is I'm not going to be the first in the nation because it would raise questions about the state's power over the federal executive branch.
So I'm just looking at this order from Judge Merchan, and it's so interesting. Obviously, Jessica, in the news business, we're often asked to keep talking while we break down what is happening. And in fact, when I look at this this brief from Judge Merchan, it's literally just a couple of sentences. It doesn't even give details in the way that you are as to why he's making this decision. We're left to surmise and to speculate that it is, in fact, because the executive, the president, the leader of the free world, would not be able to execute his actions as president of the United States if he were sentenced in this conviction. But is that surprising to you that it's just a one-pager?
It's not. So when it comes to judicial opinions, I mean, you and I get to talk about big Supreme Court decisions, and I think we're used to pages and pages, and we have to go through. Or even for some of these state criminal cases. I mean, you and I have talked about decisions out of Georgia, and obviously this case in New York, the civil case in New York. And typically we see a little bit more explanation, but that's not required. All that's required is a judge to say thumbs up or thumbs down. And I suspect that there are reasons why the judge simply didn't want to get into all of the reasons. Again, this is a situation where we've put Judge Merchan as the first judge in the nation to have to confront this situation. So let's look at history for a moment. We have had President Clinton face a civil case, and a judge said it's okay for that civil case that Paula Jones brought against President Clinton for alleged sexual harassment before President Clinton was in office. It's okay for that to go forward. But then we have other cases that talk about the idea that presidents are immune from criminal cases, immune from civil liability for official acts. And they all talk about this protective bubble that we need to put around the president and the presidency. And I suspect that it just wasn't worth it for Judge Merchan to go down all of these new roads and to be the first judge to have to plow these new paths and say, here's what I'm thinking, and here's why I think it doesn't make sense. Because frankly, part of this is legal, but part of this is a judge just exercising his discretion to say, I don't think it makes sense to impose the sentence now. And let's, again, push pause or stop.
Jessica, just stand by. Let's bring in Graham Gaetz. Graham, just take us through how we got here to this moment.
Sure. So listen, this is the third time that sentencing has been delayed in this case. You'll recall it was originally scheduled for July, and that's because President-elect Trump was convicted at the end of May. And the first postponement of sentencing happened because the Supreme Court released its landmark ruling that the presidents or former presidents have immunity for their official acts. And Trump's defense said that it was going to, and it indeed did, file a motion to dismiss, arguing that during President-elect Trump's trial, there were witness testimony and evidence that reflected official acts. And of course, prosecutors said, this was a sliver of a mountain of evidence if, in fact, any of it violated that ruling. And they said they didn't believe it did. And so the judge delayed the first effort at sentencing so that those two sides could put out their arguments and the motion. And then in the interim, Trump's team filed another motion to delay sentencing, saying that the new sentencing date, which was in September, was too close to the presidential election. And there was not really a legal argument here as much as you don't want to interfere with the presidential election argument. And the judge agreed. He said that he didn't want to be accused of having any sort of bias or agenda in whatever his sentence was going to be. So he pushed back the sentencing to what was supposed to be this coming Tuesday, November 26th. And then after Trump won the election, his defense said, this not only should there not be sentencing, but this entire case should be dismissed because he won the election. That, in fact, even as president-elect, it would be unconstitutional to do anything to distract him from the demands of the office. And prosecutors themselves agreed. They said it's okay to delay it while we figure this out. But they did say that they are opposed to dismissing the case outright. They said there should be a balance between the constitutional concerns, the demands of the presidency and the president-elect, and the will of the jurors who unanimously found him guilty of 34 felonies when he was a civilian, when he wasn't the president-elect. And they implied that they're going to argue there's nothing in the law that says you should dismiss a criminal case already decided because someone's elected to the presidency.
Right. Jessica, so just again, just sort of for the folks who are joining us now who are expecting coverage from our San Francisco station, the official ruling now from Judge Juan Merchan in New York is that the president-elect's sentencing on those 34 counts related to that hush money sentencing in the Stormy Daniels case is now canceled indefinitely. But I just want to make sure that I'm reading, because I'm not a lawyer, but you are, it does appear that the judge isn't allowing reply briefs from either side. The stay is granted pending filings of a motion for dismissal, but could he still sentence the president-elect before January 20th, or is this really done and over?
So you are looking at something that I don't have access to right now, but I will say based on what you described, it's not done and over in that you can, as a judge, take something off of calendar and you can put it back on calendar. So in this case, there is going to be more motion practice about a motion to dismiss, as you said. And then The question for the judge is really one, first about substance. Does the entire case go away because either of the immunity decision? I think that's not the case. Or because we have a criminal convict here, somebody who is convicted of crimes, who's now going to be the president of the United States again. So are either of those legal grounds to say this case goes away? Then we have another tract here, which is looking at sentencing. And the question becomes, if the case holds, if there isn't a motion to dismiss that's successful, then when, if ever, does the sentencing occur? And it looks like that's what we're talking about right now, which is the sentencing isn't going to happen, at the very least, until we figure out what, if anything, will happen before January 20th on those two substantive decisions. And again, just to clarify again, we're doing breaking news, trying to be as clear as possible. The judge has not issued a decision about what happens in this case as a result of the Supreme Court's immunity decision, which again says that presidents and former presidents have immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts. I think that does not affect this case. I do not think we're talking about official acts. Second, we have motions to dismiss, meaning this case should go away, based on the idea that we're talking about somebody who is just elected to be the next president. And so for reasons that are a bit amorphous, but are certainly grounded in constitutional principles, this case should go away, period. And then finally, we have, if the cases stay, when, if ever, do we impose a sentence? So all of those things are up in the air. I know I gave you a very long answer, but the answer is the judge can put this back on calendar. We could have a sentence. If there's a sentence before January 20th, let's be clear, I really don't think it will be jail time.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, Jessica Levinson. Thank you very much, as always, for jumping in at the very last minute with the breaking news. Graham Gaetz as well, who's been covering this trial and the sentencing from the very, very beginning. Again, if you're just joining us now, New York Judge Juan Merchan has delayed sentencing indefinitely in President-elect Donald Trump's hush money case and has granted the president-elect permission to file a motion to dismiss the case. So that is where we are right now, but I'm going to toss it over to Elizabeth Cook, who's live from San Francisco with all the breaking news. This is CBS News 24/7.